Hey witches, it's Willow Moonlight, and today is a rainy day in the Maritimes. I am off work today, which is nice, although I wish I had a little bit more time off. I have my orange and black tea that I made just a few minutes ago. And today I want to review this book called The Pagan Book of Living and Dying, and it's by Starhawk and Macha, Nightmare, and the Reclaiming Collective. My apologies on the pronunciation of that second name. This is a book that I purchased quite a while ago, and I've read it twice so far, and it is a very good book. I would give this book a very high rating. I don't necessarily agree with everything in this book. However, if you are seeking out information on living and dying in the reclaiming community, this is an excellent book. So there are a few things that I want to share about that book. So the first part of the book is dedicated towards the pagan tradition. The first 54 pages are kind of like a pagan 101. You could really skip reading that part if you already know how to do things like cleansing a space, casting a circle, grounding, meditation, visualization, the wheel of the year. All of that is within the first part of the book, and I did read it. However, really, you could just save yourself some time by skipping that if you have experience within the pagan community and within that tradition. It does do another little overview of what is called the sacred cycle. That is 5 cycles: birth, growth, death, decay, and regeneration. The book will go in more depth about each of those cycles. And there was an interesting definition here of witch and witchcraft that I want to read to you because I thought it was very poignant. And that is on page, oh, you can't really see it, it's blurry, but it's page 9. And it says, witch and witchcraft are misunderstood terms that we proudly reclaim, both in these pages and in the pagan community. While the popular understanding of witchcraft often includes either devil worship or the wielding of supernatural powers, we know that the term has a more ancient and honorable history. It derives from the Anglo-Saxon root wick, meaning to bend or twist. It is related to willow, a sacred tree much used for its flexible branches in basketry and building. Witches were those who could bend or twist fate, who could spin or who could weave new possibilities, who used willow bark, from which aspirin is now derived, and other herbs in healing, who preserved the communal knowledge of the properties and uses of plants, who kept the old earth-based way long after most European culture was at least nominally Christian. So I really enjoyed that passage of the book. after the sort of introductory part of the book, as I say, the first 54 pages, it starts to go into the pagan view of death. And there is also another very poignant line in the book. I won't read it, but it talks about having an uncomfortable, that we are so uncomfortable with the idea of having beliefs in paganism, or rather a fixed belief, because we tend to value diversity and intellectual freedom within paganism. And we also don't want to oppress those whose beliefs are different or are unpopular. So the book does caution you to think for yourself and to also use your intuition. Unfortunately, my criticism of that is we're kind of within a faith, or not faith, but a religion or a spiritual community where anything is whatever you want it to be. I don't particularly like having that, because there just doesn't seem to be enough order for me, and I am a person who does prefer to have order. But I also enjoy being able to freely, explore different ideas. However, that is sort of the disclaimer that they put within the book. Something else that I really enjoy about this book is how we talk about what death teaches us. And that is, death teaches us to savor life. And that death sustains life because it creates change. There's a section dedicated on karma and reincarnation, looking at the pagan view. It does discuss the doctrine of karma in terms of cause and effect, meaning what you do in this lifetime will impact the next. And while this is a comforting philosophy when things go well, when you meet misfortune, illness, suffer loss, must you feel guilt for hypothetical misdeeds of previous existence? And they state, if yes, then you rationalize blaming victims and accuse the oppressed for their own oppression. This makes a lot of sense to me, because, and this definitely addresses maybe some of the anomalies that have kind of built up with karma and reincarnation. So in the pagan view, they talk about using karma as a way to motivate for social justice. I really would have liked them to have gone in depth more about the pagan view. I've got the pagan criticisms of karma and reincarnation, but perhaps I would like to explore a little bit more about how pagans see and interact with karma. However, the book is more about dying than it is with living. Then it starts to jump into the more spiritual component of the book, or I shouldn't say more spiritual component, but the activities, spiritual activities rather. Working with the dying, they obviously emphasize to be present and to make sure that you are taking care of yourself during this time. They give a few tips on how to accomplish that, but it's only really focusing on the basic necessities, because dying sometimes, working with the dying can be very demanding, and there's not really a whole lot of time that you're going to spend with yourself, depending on who it is that's dying or who you're working with, especially if it's someone who's very close to you. They also list various crystals, herbs, and oils that you can use while working with the dying. Quartz crystals are very popular, rose being for self-love in difficult times. Smoky quartz is good for grounding, amethyst for spiritual healing, and they also provide many others that would be useful during this time. And oils, the ones that I would emphasize is using lavender and rosemary to cleanse and purify a space. And also citrus is nice as well. Obviously, if someone is dying, you may want to consider what they're able to tolerate. Some people who may be, dying with certain conditions may have a lot of nausea and vomiting. So you may want to keep in mind that smells can trigger that. So they also provide different rituals and prayers around purifying your space, and different prayers that you can say while working with the dying. During the moment of death, they do explain a little bit of what they know about the moment of death, or what humans, scientists have figured out. It's only a very small paragraph, so if you wanted to learn more about the actual physical part of dying, I suppose this would not be the book for you. However, it does just briefly explain what happens during that moment as far as what we know. And during this time, the god and goddess can assist us, and also our ancestors, whether it's coming from the person who is crossing over, who's dying, or the people who are present at the time that someone has died. And you can invoke the god and goddess at this time. There are also prayers that you can say for those who have died, and they have put some of those prayers in the book. And what we can do for those who have died is that we want to wash them with clear spring water if we can. If not, we can just use regular tap water. If we're not able to wash that person for, whatever reason, we can bless them, and we can visualize washing. We can burn sage at this time, and it's also recommended that we cover the person who has died, usually in like a white cotton sheet if you can. However, there's no hard and fast rules about it. And you can also provide a blessing. They basically bless every part of the body and acknowledge what that part was used for, like your heart, your hands, your eyes, whatever, everything. It's a whole body scan. And it also discusses a few other concepts like different rituals that you can do, and also briefly talks about ghosts and hauntings. I'm not particularly a big fan of ghosts and things like that. I just never felt a very strong pull towards them. I don't even know if they exist. I just don't feel a strong connection, that's all. I'm an earth element. For funerals and memorials, it suggests having both a public and a private ritual. So you can have a public memorial or funeral that anyone and everyone can participate in, and then also a private one with a select group of people who may wish to conduct a ritual. This is very useful if maybe the individual was not out as a pagan. So you can choose the setting, whether it be indoors or outdoors, or, you know, in somebody's home. That is entirely up to the group. How the person is buried, you could have the body present if possible, or you can also do that without the body. I know there's obviously different rites around, you know, what to do with the body when it dies. You can't just lug it around with you. They didn't really mention that in the book, of course, but I don't know if it really has to be said. So I don't know, that's just something funny that came to my mind. So most likely you probably won't have the body at your public ritual, but you can definitely bring photographs or, you know, ashes if you have access to ashes, if they were cremated. Really any representation of the person. Probably photographs would be the easiest. In the beginning you can play music as people gather. Then there should be some kind of offering made to the god and goddess. You can cast a circle, call the four corners, invoke the god and goddess, give an offering to the ancestors. Then there's time for song, for singing, or just music in general. Then you can start to tell stories and to raise power. And the book talks a little bit more about what that is and how to achieve it. Then is the food and drink component. Some may know it as cakes and ales. Then you can devoke what has been invoked. And then it proceeds to give a story of a personal account of a funeral or a private ritual that was conducted by someone. It's actually a very interesting read. The book also talks about different kinds of death. It talks a lot about AIDS. I should mention that this book was published in 1997, so we are almost at the tail end of the AIDS epidemic there. So it was very important to discuss taking care of those who are dying of AIDS-related causes and how to, you know, treat those individuals. Maybe today it might not really seem like it's I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it's not like we need as many reminders today of how to treat people. However, it's, you know, it's definitely a worthwhile read, and I really enjoyed reading the personal stories about working with those who died of AIDS-related causes. It talks about the death of a child and how to explain death to a child. It discusses miscarriages and stillbirths and different rituals and prayers that can be used during that time. It talks about violent deaths and also sudden deaths and deaths in service of life. So those who maybe have died at war or have died on the job, like firefighters, policemen, you know, people who maybe are like truck drivers or something like that and have died while on the road. Sudden deaths could be just, you know, dying of a heart attack. Violent deaths could be, you know, murders. And there's different prayers again that they provide in the book that you can recite during that time. And they also give different personal accounts of those who have lost someone from those deaths. They also discuss death and choice. And while there is no one choosing to die, it is not against a pagan view. And again, they don't have one set doctrine that we must follow around death and choice. They do discuss abortion quite in detail, which is the death of a possibility. It is ending a life. There's different prayers and rituals that are in the book that you can do. You can send the child back to wherever the holding spot for souls are, and you can re-invite that soul later to come back when you are at a time where you are going to go through with child rearing. Also, you can send the soul again back to that holding spot and have that soul be sent out to another person so that soul can live on. What else? Another thing that they talk about is that they do support the right to die in cases of terminal illness, or when a person has a chronic illness and they have suffered enough, because you can legally refuse treatment. And it does discuss a little bit around the ethics in dying. And there's also different prayers and rituals that they published in the book to help guide you if that is a choice that you make. They also discuss organ donation, I should mention. It is a personal choice, and there are no objections within the pagan point of view. And they also provide a prayer for those who wish to go through organ donation. So that completes my little book review. It was just an overview of what is in the book. I thoroughly enjoyed that book. I think it is one of the favorite books that I have on my shelves. Again, not everything I agree in the book with, or I may just think differently. However, that book does support my freedom to think differently.